Okay, we're going to take a look at the function editor now and cover a few things that we haven't covered in any of the previous tutorials. So the first thing I want to do is add in a procedural terrain because that is driven by a function, and it'll give us a good idea of some of these features, and you'll see that in just a sec. We're going to double click on this procedural terrain and go into our terrain editor. And now if we go to altitude production under the procedural tab, we can right mouse click and go to edit function. Wait for that to come up. And as you see here, I have two things open, the function node preview and the function output observer. I'm going to close out the other one right now and actually close them both out just so that we can see where those come up. If we go to the top right over here, we have our function output observer on the right, which is a little camera, which is going to give us a preview of our procedural texture, or in this case, our terrain. And if we take a look at the other one, we get a function node preview. And I'm going to cover this in just a minute, but first let's take a look at our function output observer, or our little preview of our function. As you notice, this doesn't really resemble our terrain that we have set up right now, and there's a reason for that. If we take a look at our actual terrain, you can see that we sort of have that mountain effect. This is actually the function that's driving our terrain, but since we have zero edges on, and this is a procedural terrain, we can actually turn that off and get a different effect. And now if we take a look, we get pretty much the same texture look. The biggest change is, of course, the Z scale, because actually it's a lot higher in actuality than it is what we see in our preview. But it could also be just our terrain editor actually making it up a little bit higher. So we can bring our function editor back in, and let's take a look and edit a few things and see how it shows up in our observer. Go ahead and click on this simple fractal, which is our default for our procedural terrain. And let's go ahead and change the largest feature. We can see this automatically re-updated, and now we have our different preview of what our terrain is going to look like. And as we adjust any of our settings within the function editor, we're actually going to see previews of everything that we're editing. So it's a very useful tool when you're working on terrains or any material for that matter. And we'll go into that in just a little bit. But there's another thing I wanted to show you, which is our function node preview. We can click on it by going to the upper right, and right next to the output observer, we can click on that, and we get our preview. Now it doesn't look like much right now, but we can actually go ahead and scale that down on the bottom left, and this gives us sort of an idea of the profiles of our terrain on different axes. And if you're used to sort of dealing with sort of a histogram, this is a very similar method to that. And what we can actually do is zoom in and out of the scale of our overall texture. And actually, as we change it, we'll see we get different types of effects. So we'll go to flat patterns and go to clumps. And now you can see the effect we have in our preview, and then sort of the effect we have in our function node preview. So the observer and the preview really are great tools to work together, because we can give an idea of pretty much how the terrain will look and how it kind of blends together and things like that. It's a very good tool to have. What we can also do is change where we're looking at the terrain. So I can actually just click and drag, and we can drag our profile over, which is giving us a size starting at 0 and going to 1000, negative 1000. Of course, the more we zoom in or out, that's going to change. What we can also do in our function output observer is change the scale of our overall function, so we can take a look at a broader scale. So in case we wanted to make that terrain a little bit larger, we can go ahead and change that without having to change any other settings. This will give us a preview of what it would look like if we changed it. What we can also do is change the origin. Let's say we wanted to move it over on the X a little bit. We can change that to 120, and it will move. I'm sorry, I hit enter by accident. Once you hit enter, it will close up the panel. But I'm going to hit 120, and that will move over our function quite a bit and change our origin. Uh, change the other side on the y-axis, and then we can also change the z-axis. So we can just move its origin, or the procedural's origin of the function. So it's kind of a neat little tool. I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and we can take a look at some of the effects we get when we're editing a material. So let's just use this procedural terrain that we have right now and double click on its material. And we're going to go to colors and edit function. Alright, and now what we can do is add in a noise node or a fractal node. Just add a noise node right now, and I'm going to open up those two panels right now. Now we get a little bit of a different preview when it comes to the material editor. Right now we have a sphere. Well, actually we can change that to whatever it is we want, but not actually within the function editor. What we actually have to do is go back to the material editor to change this preview. But we can get an idea of a preview size by changing certain aspects. And of course this is color, so it's not showing up a whole lot. But if I link our bump to it, we should see a little bit of a change. We can change our scale down, and there we can see our bump map showing up. And we can also take a look at the function node preview and see our bump reflected in that sort of histogram type view. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and just close this out right now and move our function editor off to the side. And if we take a look at our advanced material editor, we have a sphere set as our preview. If we go to our options tab, we can change this to a number of shapes. We have a cube, a marble, a sphere, cloud, cylinder, cone, XY plane, and 2D plane. So the 2D plane is nice because you can get an exact idea of the texture without any lighting situations, which is kind of nice. But I'm going to set this to cube right now and close that out. And actually we have to close out our observer and open it back up, and now we get that cube. Because of the scale of our actual bump right now, it looks a little weird. We can scale that down. But we can get a good idea. We can also change the other things that are in there, where we had the bottom as a checker. We can make it uniform if we wanted. We could turn off the local light. And we could also change the background color. And all this will be reflected in our output observer. So it's a really nice way of changing your preview if indeed you want to change what you're working with. So two little tools that you can use when working on or in the function editor to help you along your way.